Greetings, community. It's Kevin from Comic Talk. You're probably noticing a little bit of a difference. It's a good thing. And let's enjoy it. We're going to have a great show today. We're going to end up talking to a Mr. David Pepose, and we're going to be speaking about a whole lot of content. Some of the content behind me, some of the content in the future. This is going to be way fucking awesome. But you know what? As opposed to me just kind of keep flapping, how about we bring in my regular co-host, and have been here since the beginning, Christie SHINN. Hey, Christie.
What's up? How's it going?
How are you?
I'm doing good. Woke up today. I'm planning big things, maybe take over the world. I'm not really sure at this point. Working on another project, actually, kind of a couple. There's some that I'm waiting on
Really?
a final word of or something, or just one more step. So I think this time now is to let things incubate where they are and let them go as they go.
Now, you just completed one of your projects and you're getting all your stuff out now, right? I've seen all your pins come in. I've been seeing everything on Instagram, Facebook. I mean, you're getting everything out now, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. So, well, actually, I already finished giving everybody the Kickstarter. There's one person that I haven't sent anything to, but I don't know their info or where to send it to. So I'm kind of like, I already sent out the email. I already sent them a message. If they don't get back to me, that's on them right now. But pretty much 100%. That's been done for the last few weeks, actually. The Kickstarter, the complete fulfillment. So everything's done.
That's killer. That's so rad. Hey, I mean, all the time that you spend doing this, all the time that you spend doing your Kickstarters and everything, it just kind of seems like after now, what has this been, 8-9 months? It almost seems like we have now take the next level, take the next step, and evolved. And I think it's kind of only fitting that we end up bringing some of the people that we kind of started this whole show with, obviously other than yourself, but some of the first people that we ender interviewing. Just so happens this person is also doing a Kickstarter, and I believe it's his first. How about we bring in Mr. David Pepose?
Hey guys. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm so excited to come on the new and enhanced show. Talk about amazing, and yeah, I'm super stoked to talk about my book Spencer and Locke, Going to the Chapel, and also my new Kickstarter project, the OZ, which is down to its final week, and we are cruising at 600% funded and climbing.
That's awesome, David, and I appreciate you being here. And I first spoke with you at cons, a couple of shops. We did an interview at a shop, and then finally again back at a con, and then now on here. And I'm so grateful to have you. Before which that we engaged into this awesome interview. I mean, I want to recognize a few individuals in the chat, especially which the size of the chat in which that we have. So starting off, hey, two brothers, Dustin. And guys, I appreciate you being here. Hunter, hey man, I appreciate you being. Titus, as always, you've always been here along with Z. I thank you also. Chris, thanks much. Chaos, Cyborg, and hey Ruben, how you doing? And I think there's Superior Herminio. Thanks much. And hey, big shout out to Discovery Bay. He's the one that created all this, and without him, we would not be where we're at today. So I think we've nailed everybody inside of the chat. To get back to you, Mr. Pepose. David, when I was first introduced to your works, by my son. So he first showed me, hey, Dad, check this out, which was Spencer and Locke.
He's got good taste.
So he was the hey, I'm telling you. And he was the one that ended up actually giving me the little basically synopsis of what it was about, as opposed to me telling the community. Could you do me the favor and actually explain to the community Spencer and Locke?
Yeah. So Spencer and Locke, the easy elevator pitch is, what if Calvin and Hobbes grew up in Sin City? It's about a hard-boiled detective whose partner is his childhood imaginary friend. So it's our love letter to classic Bill Watterson and classic Frank Miller. If you're a fan of True Detective or Fight Club, or just are a fan of good old-fashioned Calvin and Hobbes strips, you're going to love that book. That was my breakout book. It's my baby. It's a super fun book. We actually came out with a sequel last year where we did Calvin and Hobbes versus Beetle Bailey. So if you like The Dark Knight, you like Empire Strikes Back, you like The Deer Hunter, you're going to love that sequel. And I'm hard at work on scripting Volume 3 right now. We're doing Garfield versus Peanuts. Yeah. I'm very excited. It's kind of like climbing Everest 3 times with 3 iconic strips. But we're going to, we're working hard to stick the landing on that one. That was like the little indie that could in a lot of ways. I did not know if I was going to get to do another comic after that book came out. And so I'm always so grateful and so touched by the amazing response we've gotten to that book, because if it wasn't for our readership, I don't think I would be here today.
If it wasn't for that book that you did, I wouldn't be here having this conversation with you today. My son was the one that showed it to me. He's like, you got to check this out. After just flipping through a few pages, I turned to him and I said, you know what this is about, right? He said, yeah, it's about, and I said, well, it's a little bit more than that. He didn't have the historical understanding about this, and he didn't get the fact that, one, at first, it's based off the idea of creating or fabricating a friend. Yeah. So again, can you kind of get into a little bit of the details on how this idea transpired and how this is actually blown up to where you're coming with a 3rd volume?
Yeah, boy, go back to the scene of the crime. It took me a long time to dip my toe in the comics writing pool. I grew up in the Midwest. I did not know any professional writers. The ones that I did were journalists. And so I thought if I was ever going to work in the comics industry, it would be an editorial. I interned at DC Comics when I was in college. I worked on Batman R.I.P. and Final Crisis. But as I got to learn more and more about the editorial process over the years, I realized this is all the stuff that I do this as an indie creator, but it's the least favorite parts of the job. It's being traffic cop and priest and bail bondsman, scheduling and project management, without any of the fun stuff, like getting to write it and getting to really steer the ship. So, at the time that I wrote Spencer and Locke, I had thought, everybody says write what you know. And I think that's it's a piece of advice that's wildly misinterpreted. You don't have to be, say, a doctor to write a medical drama. You don't have to be a police officer, say, to write about crime. It's talking about what speaks to you emotionally. What are the emotional experiences that you've had that you can bring to the table? Everybody knows what heartbreak feels like, or tragedy. Everybody knows what happiness and success and excitement feels like. And then it's sort of the individual bits of your life that you have that other people don't. That's what you sort of bring to the table. But at the time I said, I don't know anything about anything except comics. And I at first thought that was incredibly limiting. And then I realized it didn't have to be. I grew up reading classic Frank Miller. Daredevil, The Man Without Fear was kind of that book for me that made me realize, like, real creators, real writers, real artists make this stuff. It's not just made cookie cutter in house. And so I thought, what was the weirdest thing that could throw up against some old school Frank Miller? And when I thought about Calvin and Hobbes, it kind of hit me like a lightning bolt, because not only, is Bill Watterson this cut from the same cloth, he's that same sort of innovator and trailblazer, just on, his canvas is a little smaller, but, they both have that same subversive sense of humor. But just the source material really fit my new thesis, which is the idea of this hard-boiled cop who's been beaten up and he's grinning in the rain and he's holding a stuffed animal and thinking, oh man, like, what was that guy's home life like? What was his upbringing like? And realizing that this Calvin and Hobbes dynamic, maybe it's not the charming quirk that we thought it was. Maybe it's a symptom of a darker pathology. And as that question kind of hit me, I realized very quickly, we could really do a cool psychological study on top of the fun crime noir tropes.
And the way you touch on so many different things, and what I'm definitely going to talk about is one of the things that you really do that you carried on with the next project that we're going to speak of, is you have this pace. You have this, no matter what the subject matter is, no matter what story you tell, you have this pace that I really enjoy, because it allows the reader I think one of the common complaints about most people, especially when they have an issue 1 or an issue 2, is I just wasn't captured, or it didn't grab me, or it didn't, but what I've noticed about yours is you not only allow the reader to get emotionally attached, but involved enough to where they can remember certain characters' names or even personalities enough to where they're involved. And then they don't realize that, holy shit, I'm on issue 2 or issue 3, and I only have another issue to go. So I guess what I'm really going is I'm segueing to the next book, which is as one of my 2019's top 5 picks.
Thank you.
Going to the Chapel. All right. Now, Going to the Chapel, this was one of my favorite reads, one of my fun reads. And during this time, this was the time I end up meeting and starting to get to know Christie. So in this time that you launched this book was in a time that Christie had launched the book, and I was chasing you guys around town trying to find the book and where you guys would be. So to give that little background story, before I got to meet Christie and I was just about to meet you, could you tell us about Going to the Chapel?
Yeah, Going to the Chapel, the best way to describe it is it's like Die Hard meets Bridesmaids. It's a heist gone wrong set at a wedding. It's about a bride who is grappling with a case of cold feet. But before she can say anything, her big day is interrupted by a gang of Elvis-themed bank robbers. Unfortunately, they did not count on the bride's dysfunctional family, and the heist is immediately botched. The police surround the chapel, and this bride realizes that she's going to have to become the ringleader of her own hostage situation to get out of walking down the aisle. It's super fun. There's a little Ocean's 11 in there. There's a little bit of Wedding Crashers. There's a little bit of Arrested Development in the mix. I thought that rom-coms got a bad name, and so I wanted to kind of reclaim the genre back. And what was been so fun about Going to the Chapel and the way that people have responded to it is that people there are a lot of people who were embarrassed to say that they like rom-coms, and I was like, yeah, but this is also like a crime action comedy. And so people have really responded to it in a big way. There are a lot of dudes who would not say that they would read a romance who are like, yeah, I'm really into this. There are a lot of women who are not into crime and action who are like, this was so fun. And if Spencer and Locke was like direct market catnip, Going to the Chapel is like direct market counter programming. My philosophy has always been, how can we invite more people to the table? How can we build that wider consensus? And while I try to make my books as accessible as humanly possible, Going to the Chapel is my book. Like, oh, you don't read comics and you really don't have any interest in reading comics, give this a shot. You're going to realize that like our industry and our medium, there are multitudes, and there's a lot of different stories that can be told that you might not be expecting yet.
There's a lot that you touch in here. Like you say, you touch on the rom-com, you touch on, to me, there's Tarantino aspects in here. You know what I mean? But you touch on a lot of emotion at times. You touch on some real dark shit at times. And then the comedy that flies out of the grandmother's mouth just kills me every fucking time.
Yeah, based on a true grandma. My grandma Helen did not serve in the military as far as I know, but I feel like if she were in that situation, that's exactly how she would have responded. But yeah, it's funny you mentioned like the Tarantino side, and I do definitely see a lot of that influence. I grew up watching those. I don't want like foot fetishes or like uses of racial slurs in my work like Tarantino, but like I do like the way that he paces things, the way that he plays around with time and structure, the way that he is able to mix humor and action. Those are all things that I like, and why would I feel like I have to choose between them? So yeah, those definitely speak to me in a big way. People like Rick Remender I think speak to me in a similar fashion. He is so deliberate with all of his choices, not just in the character work and the dialogue, although he's very, very good at those, but the way he paces things. I think his pacing is really second to none. But yeah, it's funny that you say, oh, you touch upon a lot of stuff. And I think that comes from my internal philosophy of, oh God, I'm never going to get to write another one of these books. So that's why I keep doing all these mashups. That's why I keep trying to do a little column A and a little column B. Some of it is just artistic laziness. That I'm like, well, if I get stuck in this one groove, I can shift to another groove. But it's also I don't know how many of these books I'm gonna get to do, and so every book I do, I want to make sure I kind of jam as much of it in there as possible, and really kind of make, like, I'm the guy who's filling up like 10 plates at the all-you-can-eat buffet, because I don't know if I'm gonna get to come back for seconds.
Well,
I love that mentality. I'm sorry, Christy, please.
Oh, no, I was going to say, if you got to do it, you got to do it like with me and a few other people. Like, we just scan the buffet at first. Like,
yeah,
what do we want to eat? And then we just pile it on there. But we also, it's kind of like weird because, like, buffet eating, it's like almost a marathon thing. Like, don't eat the carbs. Don't eat the carbs. It's going to blow up in your stomach. You can't eat the meat. The meat's the expensive shit. So you got to go eat the meat and the stuff and the fish. You got to fill up on that shit.
I'm the guy who's like bringing multiple handbags with them and just being like, okay, what can I shove in the bags to take home with me? What will keep, what will not leak too hard in the bag?
Yeah, like I knew people's mothers that would do that. Like, oh, I can't finish this, but it's a piece of fruit, so they just wrap it in a napkin and they put it in their purse. I'm like,
I can say one of my favorite stories for was at the Ringo Awards 2 years ago, and my mother surprised me at the awards ceremony, which is very kind of her. And when the ceremony left, and we were nominated for 5 awards, we didn't receive any, which I was like, we're in great company, like I'm not mad about it, but my mom was. So she did that exact same thing. People were leaving their Ringo gift bags and she was like swooping in and taking, like, she like was like running to her car with like 6 Ringo gift bags, and so I come by it honestly, that I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know if I'm getting another shot at this, so I'm going to try to do as many different things as possible, both so I don't get bored, and both so, if that's the last book I ever get to write, I will feel good knowing that I threw everything I possibly could into it.
Yeah, it's like kind of interesting. It's like kind of have to think outside the box without actually just trying to do a checklist of stuff. It's just, It has to come into your brain organically. So it's sort of one of those things like with my work, I just kind of think on the things like, what can I draw today? And it's like, well, if it pisses people off, that's going to be funny. And I get sort of disappointed when it doesn't. So,
it's funny. It's funny because, for me, as I've evolved a bit and as I've found my feet a little bit more as a writer, it's funny you use the phrase checklist, because that's exactly like when I wrote Spencer and Locke Volume 1, and like I said, that's a combustible high concept. You don't know if you're gonna whether you succeed or fail, you're gonna do it loudly. You cannot do that book quietly. And so I had like almost like an unofficial checklist of like, okay, if I can only do one book, I want to have a car chase, and I want to have like a big blowout hand-to-hand fight, and I want to have some sci-fi in the mix. And you know what? Dinosaurs are cool. I would love to have some dinosaurs, and a psychological element. Like, I would like that.
Well, it sounds more like a chronological thing. Like, fuck, I just want to develop this.
Yeah, well, it's
that, and then this thing in that way.
What's funny is that when I wrote that book, and I was like, okay, if that's all I get to do, then I'm happy. Yeah. I finished that book, and then I immediately had a new checklist. And I was kind of like, oh, crap. Like, if I feel like every book I do, my bucket list grows because it's in reaction to what I've just finished writing. And so, like, comparing Spencer and Locke and Going to the Chapel for a moment, Spencer and Locke, is a really tight, intimate cast. Spencer and Locke, they're the title characters, and it's mostly around them and a very few supporting cast members. Mm-hmm. And I love that book, but I considered that to be like one of the shortcomings, I'd say, of that book. And so the next book I wrote was Going to the Chapel, which had 16 speaking roles in one location. And that was a direct response to Spencer and Locke. Same thing with the shift in tone. Even the choice not to use narrative captions in Going to the Chapel was specifically because that's what I did in Spencer and Locke. And they're a very effective tool, but they can be a very easy crutch. And so I wanted to make sure that I wrote some books that I didn't do that, just to kind of keep those muscle groups intact. But yeah, I feel like that's been really helpful for me now as I found my feet a little bit, is I'm kind of like, oh, I really want to do, I find like I watch things and I see other people's tricks and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I want to do something like that. Like a time loop story, for example. I've got a time loop story that I'm really excited about that I'm hopefully going to start digging into soon. But yeah, it's like I was watching Palm Springs, and I was just like, oh, I really love that. I want to do something like that. And or I want to do a natural disaster book, or I want to do a book involving, identical twins, or triplets, think stuff like that. Like that's what's starting to, like, I just add it to the list and I'm like, okay, that's something that there's a cool storytelling avenue or angle to tackle. And one day I'll get there. I start percolating on it for months and months and months until the right idea finally hits me.
Now, it's kind of funny, this question that's really important that has gone through my mind, and it's going to be completely random, but did that song Going to the Chapel like run through your head incessantly as you were writing the book?
Absolutely.
It's like, God damn it.
It doesn't mind.
For me, if I don't have that title that like really clicks, then like something's not right, like the concept's not right. I Going to the Chapel, or Chapel of Love, I should say, that song certainly played a lot in my head. The Night Has 1,000 Eyes, that was a big one. There was one other song that was a little bit more recent but had that kind of retro flair, and it's killing me that I don't remember what it is. I don't know. I'll have to look it up at some point. But they had it in a bunch of commercials for like Google and stuff, and it had that kind of same old school retro vibe to it. And something that felt a little lighter on its feet. That was I always listen to music when I'm getting into the headspace because I want to get that sort of energy and let those visuals kind of hit me. And of course, definitely Going to the Chapel, or Chapel of Love. Boy, it's funny. I called it Going to the Chapel specifically because it felt right with the theme and the concept, and also because it let me sort of work around, like, if I called it Chapel of Love, then I would really have to like spend a lot of money on licensing. I did have to spend money just to get the lyrics approved. But yeah, it's just every time I say Going to the Chapel as the song, I then kick myself and feel like a terrible fan because it's definitely called Chapel of Love. So sorry to everybody who likes that song.
No irony, because it's like they're going to the chapel and we're
yep
gonna get, and it's like all cute and innocent, and it's like this whole fucking thing.
Yeah, like the fact that we were able to get that that first scene, that our intro, which I think really says everything you need to know about the book. That like I was listening to that and I was like, oh yeah, you see it in Hollywood all the time where you have these sort of retro cutesy kind of songs next to like horrible acts of violence. And so the fact that we were able to do that with our intro, it wasn't horrifically violent, but just the fact that you're like, oh, shit's about to go down. That was super fun.
Well, you set it up beautifully. When the scene happens, and that was the thing, is that in issue 1, I'm getting about 3 or 4 pages into it, and the whole time I'm thinking, I'm waiting. I can see the shoe rising another foot higher. Now I'm just waiting for that shoe to drop because I can see it coming. And there it is. There's the shoe to drop.
The Bad Elvis Gang. I'm a huge fan of Point Break. And so, the idea of having my own themed bank robbers was just too irresistible to pass on. And my buddy and mentor, Troy Brownfield, he was really the one that I was thinking like, oh, I need to think of a cool gang theme that works with a wedding. And he was like, Elvis, like immediately. And I was like, you are absolutely right. Like, it evokes the quickie weddings. It evokes kind of that desert setting that we've got in the book. It's got just enough style to it, but something that's got room for a little bit of menace. Having our Bad Elvis Gang, that was super fun. I really had a blast with that.
It kind of makes me think of Graceland, actually.
Yeah.
I really actually like Graceland. I watched that one.
Yeah.
It was like the good Elvis and the bad Elvis, and then you don't know if the bad Elvis was really Elvis's son because in the movie it's like the DNA test was inconclusive. But and then like when they have that standoff, they're going like, yeah, did you ever take after Dad? I don't know if Dad really liked you. Well, you didn't, that type.
Yeah, getting to play with iconography is something that's always kind of fun. And it's interesting because I didn't think about it until you just said it. But, of course, Spencer and Locke and Spencer and Locke 2 and my new book, The OZ, of course, they are derived from pre-existing stories and properties. But even going to the chapel, this idea of having that kind of common touchstone, that cultural touchstone that we all know, it lends a little bit of extra weight to the mix, and it's sort of like, oh, okay, even if you've never read a comic, you've been to a wedding, and even if you've never watched a Tarantino movie, you know who Elvis is. It's that cultural osmosis that I think I'm always trying to dig into and trying to figure out what's like the common threads here, something that's just a common touchstone that we can all latch onto, and that I think kind of helps get people over the threshold of giving our books a shot.
Yeah. Well, it's also I'm thinking Kill Bill too as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Kill Bill, like when she's about to get married and they just light up the church and everything, and then there's that scene where she's there. So it's like this whole crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So, like I was just thinking about that, like the bride and everything.
Yeah, it's kind of like if Julia Roberts or Bridget Jones wound up in a Tarantino movie. It's sort of I'm a sucker for those old school rom-coms, but yeah, putting that kind of action heist comedy veneer over it, people don't, they get all that, they respond to that, and then they're like, oh, there's a love triangle in here, and it's something that's actually kind of engaging. Like, okay, like I can see that, and yeah, it's just trying to put a new spin on an old type of classic.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like, I also kind of think, for me, rom-coms, and it's weird because you mentioned like a lot of girls, not that a lot of girls like them, but a lot of guys wouldn't admit to liking rom-coms. Yeah. A lot of women don't admit to liking action. It's kind of funny because I kind of grew up in a household where I would just hang out with my dad. We'd watch like Predator and Total Recall and all that old school shit. Yeah. So when we did, and RoboCop, and when they came out with the new shit, it was like, what kind of crap is this? It wasn't like, as raw. Like, I mean, yeah, you go back and those movies are kind of dated from the early 90s and like mid to early to mid 80s, but I mean, like, they were cool in their own way because they were kind of ridiculous. And that's the thing. Like, I like those better than rom-coms. I think, and actually a lot of rom-coms, and I'm sorry, Kevin, but it's just like a lot of rom-coms are like written to kind of, and again, there's some good rom-coms I like, but I can't really name them because I can't think of it because there's an overwhelming bad amount that makes, like, when they write it, it sort of makes me feel like, are you insulting me as a person? Because I don't know if I should feel bad about this. Like, oh, all the girls are all like terrible and they're really stupid and brainless and the guys are dumb too. And it's like, then you should too get together and breed and destroy the human race. I don't understand.
Exactly.
Like, it's just like, there's these like stereotypes and archetypes. Now, I mean, there are people that are that way, but
exactly.
It's like, yeah, go on.
The rom-coms have been defined, I think, over the last 20 years as a genre by their faults rather than by like the potential. And it's exactly what you were saying. There are people who make stupid decisions for making stupid decisions. They're often very predictable. You kind of know straight from the poster what's going to happen, who's going to wind up with who. And, it's always based on like terrible, like easy to navigate miscommunications, and then of course it's like a misunderstanding and then they get back together, and those are all things that those give rom-coms a bad name.
It's just like, and also the characters are just, I mean, you can write a really shitty character, but you can relate to them or you can kind of like them. That's like, people like the Joker, even though he's this horrible character, but they like him because it's actually honest to form a lot of the time when they write him. But with a lot of rom-coms, it's like, I really fucking hate all these people, and if you just burn them all, I'll be fine. Because like all of them are just shallow and stupid. And again, you can make parodies of that. You can make a good movie out of that. I'm just listing the Joker as, but I mean, the Joker is funny. I mean, or funny or cool because like you can take that and go so many which ways, and it's still very. Right. But it's like a lot of the characters in rom-coms, it's like, I fucking hate all of you. I just hope you die.
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to for a lot of these rom-coms where, exactly like you said, they're either dumb or they're predictable or they're shallow. And so I think by putting a different spin on it, we've been able to navigate some of those pitfalls. Where we're able, for example, to have a love triangle that feels organic in whichever direction that Emily decides to go. There's her fiance, Jesse, who's, he's an awkward but sweet guy. And as we see over the course of the series, he's trying to protect her, not out of being territorial, but like he's just a genuinely decent dude who nobody thinks that he could step up, and he does. Whereas there's Tom, the leader of the bad Elvis gang, who, at first you're kind of like, oh man, that guy's a scumbag. And then you realize, like, as the story continues, you're like, oh, he didn't just like dump Emily for no reason. He actually like went to jail to protect her. And so, having these characters each be compelling and endearing in their own way. And even Emily sort of realizing, like, oh, like, part of the reason why I'm so hesitant to commit is because of these kind of unresolved traumas in her past. It gives everybody a degree of sympathy, and it makes her choices, whether it's go with one or go with the other or go by yourself, it feels a little more earned. And
people ended up together because he's a nice guy. It's like, well, there's tons of nice guys. Like,
yeah,
as a woman, like, as I said, I mean, sometimes I get pressure by my, when you get pressured by your parents, go settle down and stuff. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong. I mean, that's definitely something. But it's like, when it's kind of like that well-meaning thing where your mom goes like, but he's such a nice boy, but she's such a nice girl. It's like, yes, but I feel nothing about them. Like, leave me alone. Like,
right.
So you're trying to go and coerce me. It's like, okay, they could be the greatest thing for me, and they could treat me really well, but it's like, I don't have that. So it's going to do them a disservice too, because I have no feelings. But then in reverse, you can have all the feelings for the worst person in the world.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
In between. So I think it's great because it's like, if you address that in your book, I think that makes the relationship more satisfying, because it's like, oh, they just didn't end up together by default, or they didn't do the characteristic things. It's like, oh, okay, I could see the connection. The reason.
You make them earn it, and when you put them
in a big book of insight, if I may interrupt again, this book is a big book of insight, because for me, again, in the beginning, it was so brisk, so fun, so there that it grabbed me. But by the time I got into issue 3, I started to come to the realization of, okay, see, this is a book about telling you, look, it's easy to judge a little book by using a cliche, a book by its cover. But when you start to get to know someone's story, like we always say, when you don't know what someone's going through, you don't know but when you get to go know someone's story, as shallow or as surface you think that you're able to determine or, profile who this person is, when you really get to know someone, it's hard to really, quote unquote, hate. You start to understand, like you say, empathize, sympathize, all these characteristics. The flaws start to go away, and you start to adhere to the understanding of, this is a human. It's a story about a human, but it's a human.
Yeah.
I have compassion, I have care. And you don't find yourself happening until you get to issue 3, and you're like, what the hell happened?
Yep. Yeah, it's these characters, they surprise you a little bit. Yeah, and they've got some unexpected wrinkles to them that have sort of put them in this spot. And I mean, we certainly had a few people who, the most satisfying for me as the writer of this book was that there were so many different, wildly different interpretations of our fandoms, sub fandoms in the book. There were people who were like, we are pro team Jesse. Jesse's the guy. Then there were people who were like, it's Tom. Tom's the guy. And there were some people who are like, Emily just needs some time by herself. There were some people who loved Emily. Some people who were like, I can't believe she would do this to poor Jesse. And that's exactly what you want out of a book like that. I like having a little bit of ambiguity. I like giving readers a little bit of wiggle room to sort of make their own choices. And so having so many different sub fandoms, but at the end they all came together like, but we still really like the book. That meant a lot to me, especially going to the chapel. That was a real tortured process getting that a home. I thought with Spencer and Locke we had 5 Ringo nominations. I figured it would be kind of an easy slam dunk, and I pitched that book all over town, and there were so many people who said, we love the concept and we have no idea how to sell rom-com. And I was like, but it's a heist action comedy that happens to have rom-com elements. And so I give Action Lab a lot of credit. They didn't hesitate for a second, and I think it's because they had worked with me before and they knew that I was good for it. But seeing kind of the overwhelming response to that book and seeing how people really responded to it, and seeing how people realize there's more to me than just dark and gritty. It's been very heartening for me as a creator, and I think it's shown a lot of people that like I have depths that I promise you haven't seen yet. But if you keep buying my books, I promise.
And I want to touch on that. I want to touch that. That's where we're going next. So we talked about Spencer and Locke. We talked about going to the chapel. Well, I've talked about the definitive. You have, like I said, a pace, a style that's definitely defined by you, and you can see. But at the same point, there's so much contrast because what you did from Spencer and Locke is close what you did in Going to the Chapel, which is nowhere close to this post-apocalyptic stylings of something that we all know traditionally. And you took a classic tale of Frank Baum, and then you just twisted it and tortured it and gave us this awesome, like I said, post-apocalyptic tale of something that we already know. Without me torturing it anymore, can you please tell the community what I am so stoked about and ready for? OZ. Oz.
Yeah. The OZ, I'm super stoked about this. It's my first Kickstarter project. It's currently up right now through the wee hours of September 16th. The OZ is what if Mad Max and the Hurt Locker took place in the Wizard of Oz. We've reimagined Dorothy Gale killing the Wicked Witch of the West as something like a botched regime change. And so when she clicked her heels together and went home to Kansas, she inadvertently turned Oz into a power vacuum that would lead to years of brutal civil war. So our story picks up a generation later with Dorothy's granddaughter and namesake, who's a disillusioned Iraq war veteran. And she's come back home to Kansas with some real scars and some real trauma and some real guilt. And she's trying to put the pieces of her life back together when a tornado strikes. And this new Dorothy finds herself stranded in the war-torn land of Oz. So she's going to have to really confront her past and her grandmother's former friends if she hopes to survive the occupied zone, or as the locals call it, the OZ.
It kind of reminds me of... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, please. No, please.
No, I was just saying, for some reason, it kind of reminds me, remember that prison series Oz?
Sure. Yeah, which was inspired, but that was supposed to be like a stealth Wizard of Oz riff.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy because, like, and again, I'm not trying to detract from the book. It was just made me think of that because it's like you're taking a concept like, oh, it's all colorized now, it's cute and everything. And I used to read the Oz books a lot, and that's what really got me into art, like a drawing, because the Gibson Girl type drawings. I mean, initially they had a different illustrator, but then as the series went on, and it was wondrous and everything. But then when you're an adult and you're like, oh, like the concept of magic being outlawed except by the elites, like, oh, that's kind of like some forms of gun control. It's like, oh my God, And then there's other ones where, but like with Oz, it was kind of like you're in hell now, but it's Oz. It's like a whole thing. So it's kind of like, you realize, like, when you read the original Oz and you look at it back with adult eyes and you look at the iterations, it's like, well, that's not that far of a jump because there's some very sinister undertones under this nice little veneer. And then this one, it appears that the veneer is like, no,
it's totally gone. I think you hit the nail right on the head. And I think, it also speaks to L. Frank Baum. Just, he wrote with such archetypes that have really kind of penetrated the popular consciousness. And I think the Judy Garland film was a huge reason for that, as well as, that was sort of, that struck right when Technicolor was becoming a thing. And so they literally switched the silver slippers to ruby specifically to highlight that Technicolor. Mm-hmm. And so, going back to what we were talking about earlier, sort of what's in the popular consciousness, what's the common touchstone? It's sort of Oz has these amazing archetypes that we've built so much of pop culture on. And yet, because they were told in a different era, and because it was aimed towards children, particularly the Judy Garland film, there's so much room to build upon it. And there's so much room to kind of twist and turn and remix things while still staying true and organic to the original concepts. And it's been really fun to explore that in the OZ, is that, this isn't just a fantasy book, but it's also a war story. And taking those two genres and seeing what kind of sparks come when they collide. That's been a really fun bit of discovery for me. And I think has yielded some really fun moments that readers are going to see in this book.
Yeah, it just makes me think of the demilitarized.
What I noticed is that you what I noticed is what you've taken is something that was pre-existing in the sense of what we knew is a story of old, and all you did was crank it up to 10, or in the case of, as we all know, 11. So we could run a little clip and go ahead and what
Are you a fan of Mad Max or Lord of the Rings? Then let me introduce you to your new favorite book, The OZ, our brand new comics project here on Kickstarter. I'm David Pepose, the Ringo Award-nominated writer of Spencer and Locke, Going to the Chapel, and the upcoming Grand Theft Astro. And whether you're new to my work or returning as a fan, I'm excited to show you what our team has in store with The OZ. The OZ is an epic fantasy war story that reimagines the classic mythology of the Wizard of Oz and remixes it through the battle-scarred lens of Mad Max Fury Road, the Old Guard, and the Sheriff of Babylon. Taking place a generation after Dorothy Gale and her friends defeated the Wicked Witch and liberated the land of Oz, the OZ follows Dorothy's granddaughter, a disillusioned Iraq war veteran who shares her name, and struggles to find purpose as she cares for her ailing grandmother in Liberty, Kansas. Battling trauma and depression from her time overseas, this world-weary soldier has spent years hearing her grandmother's tall tales of a magical world on the other side of the rainbow. But when Dorothy is dragged away one night by a runaway tornado, she finds herself stranded in the war-torn land of Oz. After decades of brutal civil war following the Wicked Witch's death, Dorothy must navigate the factions left by her grandmother's former friends, the Tin Soldier, the Courageous Lion, and the Scarecrow, in order to survive the horrors of the occupied zone, or as the locals call it, the OZ. So we're here today to ask you, our Kickstarter backers, for your help in funding our double-sized first issue. All funding will go towards our production and print costs for our 44-page debut, and any additional money will go towards our second issue. We've also got some exciting rewards for our backers, including 3 limited edition variant covers, original artwork from series artist Ruben Rojas, a chance to get drawn into the book, and plenty of behind-the-scenes material as well. You may think you know the story of Oz, but this is the story of what comes next. So join us today as we drop you into the trenches of the OZ.
That is friggin' awesome. You have no idea how much I'm chomping on the bit for this. And one of the things I want to tell the community is, yes, it's a Kickstarter. Yes, all the links are in below. And I want to inform them of something that really impressed the hell out of me, David. I read that you are printing all of this book on the heavy 80-pound glossy paper stock. Yes. And then that the cover is going to be done with the 100-pound gloss cover stock.
Yes.
So in my calculation, that makes each book 180 pounds.
Yeah, you know it. You know, it's one of those things. You know, I've been so fortunate to know so many people who have done Kickstarter projects, like Christie or Charlie Stickney from White Ash. Our friend Ryland Grant just finished his Kickstarter for The Jump. Yeah. And really, you know, Russell Nahelty, who's got Ichabod Jones up on Kickstarter right now. You know, a real. You know, all my friends in Los Angeles who do comics, they've all done Kickstarters at some point. Mm-hmm. And so it's been really helpful for me to have that brain trust and that those resources, those people that I can pick their brains and say, what's the best practices of this? Because ultimately, best practices, that's what I want for this Kickstarter. You know, that's what you offer readers in exchange for saying, hey, I don't want to go through the rigmarole of dealing with a traditional publisher, that I don't want to wait for permission to create anymore. Is the question always is, what can we do to add more value? What can we do to make sure that you get the most bang for your buck? That's why every issue of the OZ is going to be double-sized at 44 pages. You know, I had written this initially as 6 standard-sized issues before realizing they pair together nicely in a 3-act structure. And so, you know, we're able to offer that to all of our readers. Every single tier has a first issue PDF of Spencer and Locke #1 and Going to the Chapel #1. So you get to meet my work no matter what tier you throw in at. If you throw in for $10, you get 88 pages worth of story from me. Plus you get my script. Plus you get our digital comics extravaganza. We've got PDFs from a dozen hot indie creators, books like The Strange Talent of Luther Strode, Once and Future Queen, Dead End Kids, Drawing Blood from David Avalone and Kevin Eastman, just to name a few. So yeah, you know, we've got some really fun stuff for all levels of budget. We've got 4 amazing covers for this book by our series artist Ruben Rojas, Mon House from Spencer and Locke Going to the Chapel, Rio Burton, Kenneth Wagnon, who did his amazing Akira homage variant cover, down to sort of, you know, deals involving my previous trade paperbacks. We've got retailer discounts, and you know, last but not least, we've got a little piece of history if people want it. We had 10 handmade Spencer and Locke plushies made when our first trade came out. We have we have, I believe we have 2 left, maybe 1 left. So yeah, if you want a little piece of comics history, that's the place to get it. And those won't be made again, I should say. Our doll maker is out of the game, so that is it.
No.
That's awesome. One of the things I noticed is that the artists, everyone that you have supporting you, that from Spencer and Locke all the way to now, are not always consistent. But what I notice that's consistent is everyone's perfectly able to convey what I believe your message, your story.
Sure.
Now, one, it's impressive that you have these resources at your, your pile of individuals to pull from. What really impresses me is how you're able to select these individuals to do so. So how did you choose this particular pool of individuals to help you with this particular project?
Yeah, well, in this project, it was actually there was a little bit more self-selection going on. For Spencer and Locke, I had a specific project, and I pounded pavement until I found George Santiago Jr. And he was sort of the foundation for everything else. I was finding Jason Smith because I wanted to find a colorist that worked well with George. Gavin Guidry, same thing. Is I had Going to the Chapel ready, and I was looking for somebody specifically for that. By the time that I had gotten to the OZ, I had a few more ideas in my back pocket. And so I had reached out. I found Ruben Rojas on Twitter. He was answering a call for artists, and I was just shocked that nobody had picked him up. He's got a style that's like Dan Mora by way of Sean Murphy. And so I actually reached out to Ruben with 3 different projects. I had said, hey, do you, I had pitched him the OZ. I pitched him Grand Theft Astro, my upcoming Top Cow book that had not been acquired yet, and a third project that I kind of have on the back burner that I'm looking to redevelop. And Ruben immediately gravitated towards the OZ. He's a big fan of fantasy. He's a big fan of post-apocalyptic storytelling. So this really kind of hit him in that sweet spot. And for me, it's always sort of what team can I find that will work well with each other. Colorists especially, I put a lot of thought into. If anything, I think they're as important, if not perhaps more so, than finding the right line artist, because art makes or breaks your comic, and colors make or break your art. And so I am very particular about my colorists who we work with, making sure that the right fit for our line art, making sure that they're able to kind of convey the right mood and tone. And so that's why I'm so fortunate to be working with Whitney Kogar as our colorist. You might know her from the Eisner Award winning Giant Days. This is very unlike anything that she's ever done before, but Whitney and I, when we first started working together, the conversation we had was, what's the Mad Max version of Star Wars look like? Getting that grit and that intensity, but also having that sweeping sense of scope and wonder. The Land of Oz has teeth, but it doesn't make it any less beautiful. And just like you would know immediately the difference between Tatooine and Hoth and Endor and Cloud City and Dagobah, you will know the difference between the bombed out Emerald City and the Deadly Desert and the mountaintops of Ix and the Wicked Witch's Castle. That's the cool thing about Oz, is there's all these different locations with their own individual vibes and palettes and temperatures and obstacles. And that really lets us raise the stakes for Dorothy. We know that her battle, it's not just her survival, but it's for the fate of an entire world. And having all these different locations, I think, really kind of lends to that. And Whitney is, Ruben does such an amazing job at designing his settings and designing his characters. But it's Whitney that really kind of lends that temperature and that energy in such a powerful and profound way.
Yeah, again, when I was first seeing this, I was so impressed. And please, Christie, I know that like he was mentioning before, between the Kickstarter of this being his first and you doing Kickstarters in the past, I'm sure you have an understanding of what he's going through on this project. Can you two actually give us a little insight on what it's like to do a project like this on Kickstarter?
you're kind of, for my example, it's like well, why don't you talk about yours, because this is your first one, and I'll go off on that.
Yeah, it hits you different. I've done the publicity for direct market books before, and the speed is you can't account for it. The speed of it all. I think some of that is because the timing is so much more abbreviated. For direct market, you've got 3 months of pre-orders, and then you've got the publicity prior to the book coming out, and then the book comes out, and you've got reviews, and then you get to do it all over again over a month-to-month period. So it's a lot, but you get to spread it out over a longer period of time. Kickstarter, we're doing this seasonally. We're going to do our next Kickstarter probably in February. So we're cramming everything in 30 days and, a little bit of lead up beforehand. I also compounded it because I didn't reveal what the title or concept of this book was until we actually launched. I teased it for about a year in my newsletter.
Yeah, you did.
But I think my friend Zach Quaintance, who just finished his Kickstarter for a book called Next Door, he was telling me that you will not be prepared for, you're going to be constantly checking the back end to see if anybody else has contributed, to see if anybody else has altered or canceled their pledge, because that does happen from time to time. There's so much interactivity that goes into it. I'm sending backers individual thank you notes. You're constantly checking Twitter and Google and Facebook to see what people are saying. And in our case for the OZ, talking with Charlie and Russell Nahelty, they were all saying, you should operate conservatively because you've never done a Kickstarter, you don't have the data to support it. The fact that we were then funded in 2 hours, it kind of blew up every plan that I had. We had to really kind of start from the beginning, because it was like, oh, my directives were way out of whack. It was not, how do we get funded in 30 days? It's now, what do we do to keep adding value over 30 days to justify having more readers show up? And so, things like figuring out how we're going to do enhanced covers. We're working with our printer comic impressions right now over things with that, adding prints and pinups. We have some pinups from Alex Cipriano and Joe Mulvey, and we've got a few others coming as well. We've got a pinup from Kira Okamoto. And I'm actually talking with our printer right now to see what our options are for that, because I think there might be some cool options, potentially even to enhance that pinup. Things like our digital comics extravaganza. But also just okay, what can we keep doing? We did a theme song, for example. My friend George Marston composed and performed a theme song for the OZ. And so that's been its own kind of learning curve. It's certainly exhausting. It's the right kind of exhausting. It's like we were saying before the show started, it's like doing 10 conventions back to back. Yeah. I'm certainly going to sleep for a week when this is all said and done. But this is exactly the right kind of exhausting, because seeing how it just genuinely enthusiastic all of our readers have been about this project, and getting more and more new readers every single day. You love comics your whole life, and experiences like this, comics love you back. And that's something that I'll always kind of carry with me for the rest of my career.
For me, I want to go, after doing 3 of these Kickstarters with no base. I totally fucked up on my first one. That failed. But what I did was that you just, because you never know, because you're going to be scared, you're going to be in it. You're going to be, what is it? You're going to take all the lessons. You're going to fill your head full of data. Yeah. But you won't know exactly how it works until you're thrown into it.
Yes.
And once you're thrown into it, you're like, okay. And I think it's relentless pushing.
Yeah.
But what you do is that you learn not to be a hoe about it. Essentially, you do put it out there, but every time, there are behaviors that you get aware of that turn people off. Not necessarily, hopefully, that you guys don't do.
Yeah.
Or what I've not really done, but where the fine line is between asking and begging. Because when people notice that you're desperate, they will, or there's a certain, once you've run a Kickstarter, when everybody's throwing a fuck ton of shit just to save their thing, you just know.
Yeah.
They put too many things into it. I mean, I'm not saying a Kickstarter can't offer a lot of things, but then they'll throw a bunch of stuff oh, we're going to do sketch cards to try to make gold. We're going to do this. I'm like, no, that's not how you do it. Then, because you can add more sketch cards as after you exhaust your stretch goals. like, all right, well, we're decided to do this. Screw it. Like, we're going to go in for this. You kind of view it as like, we're going to go hit this. We're going to hit this. We're going to hit this.
Yeah.
So as a Kickstarter, it's weird because like, as you do more, you just realize it's sort of like almost predatory, as I was saying earlier before we went on air. It's like you're this cheetah, you see these things like gazelle or whatever, and then you just go, like your body just go, and then you go. Your mind is focused on that. But also you kind of have to pace yourself so you don't get exhausted too quickly, and then that way your mind doesn't get all hyper jittery and angry or moody or whatever. So it's like a certain level of pacing, because if you push yourself too much, you're going to not deal with things well. You're not going to make the right decisions. You still have to be calm, but you have to make the split second at times, like especially with this last one. First day I closed with like almost $1,000, and that was great. And then people were like, oh, but then like when the riots hit, it was like 3% growth, very slow and steady throughout the whole week. And that was very frustrating, because I had 2 other Kickstarters before. It's like, okay, I hit it. I hit gold, and my average for the last 2 were like 2 weeks.
Right.
And then I was like, and then for me, it was like, oh, like it wasn't, I was happy. I was relieved. And now I could focus making gravy.
Right.
And the thing is that you have to constantly move forward. I wouldn't say push all the time, because if you push and you hustle way too much, people are going to read it. Like I personally get turned off if people say to me, oh, hey, here's a long line of text. Go look at my Kickstarter. It's like, you didn't bother to talk to me. Right. You didn't bother to see how I was doing. Yeah, it's okay to ask me to support your Kickstarter, but have a conversation with me first.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of like, when a guy or a girl goes up to a dude and says, well, will you sleep with me? It's like, well, okay, no. Like maybe that'll work with some people. Yeah. But sometimes you have to kind of get to know, work up to it. Like, and if there are certain trends in your Kickstarter that are outside that are kind of funny, like I consistently had dudes that would send me a dick pic. I said, this is the sacrificial dick pic. This way I know my Kickstarter will be good. And I would just make that into a bit, but that's just demon bitch. But all I'm saying is that it's sort of like when you're more experienced, you know how to pace your energy better.
Yeah.
But it will always challenge you. As I said, there was like this last Kickstarter, there was this one person that kept putting up a pledge, taking out, putting off a pledge, taking out. First time they did that, I said, oh, hey, awesome, thank you. And then they took their pledge away. I said, well, I'm very sorry, and is there any way that I could help you with the pledge? And, usually most people you talk to and they say, well, I can't because this happened. There's nothing more you can do. Like one person dropped their pledge because their husband died. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to argue with that, but just let me know you're okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there were other ones where she just kept putting and taking off the pledge, and then after a while, like the second time, I was like, okay, and I didn't say this to her, but my attitude is like, you know what, fuck you. You're either going to stay or you're going to not go. Yeah. And you have to kind of learn that in sales and pitching, because you want to have the sale. I mean, that's what you're taught. That's what you're doing in Kickstarter. You're getting the sale and you're retaining the sale. But the thing is that some people, they'll just kind of waste your time. So you're just like, okay, I'm just not going to count it mentally until it closes and you actually are in it. But other than that, whatever.
Yeah. It's always disappointing when you get a sale and then they cancel it. And it's one of those things that I've sort of had to recognize is not everything's about me. People, like people lose jobs, people have other things pop up, people have spouses that say, I can't believe you're spending all this money on Kickstarter, cut some purchases, all sorts of things. And so, for me, it's been almost a lesson in learning gratitude, of figuring out, okay, like, you lose one person. It's like, you get all the positive reviews in the world and you read the one negative one and it ruins your day. This is the sort of, you do that on Kickstarter as well. Just sort of figuring out, like just remembering, oh yeah, like you lose one person, but you've got all these other people that are so excited and enthusiastic about your work. And that's really what Kickstarter is in a lot of ways. It's finding your tribe. And it's kind of really reassembling that diaspora of all the different readership pockets that don't necessarily hit the direct market. And so I couldn't be more grateful and appreciative for all our Yellow Brick Road warriors who have supported the OZ. And, I want to offer anybody else who wants to join our Emerald Army to please back the book on Kickstarter before September 16th.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, TGIM. Thank God it's monkeys. So hey, David, for those that may not jump on the Kickstarter, you're going to make this available on another publishing company's name, I hope. Do you have one name?
I mean, it all kind of depends. We don't have anything set in stone yet. Okay. Right now I'm committed to making sure that all of our Kickstarter backers get the whole project. But we're exploring options as far as like backer kit is concerned if people miss the boat. Kickstarter is my top priority, and then if we're able to get a second life in the direct market, I'm certainly would be happy with that. But that's been the great thing about Kickstarter is that I'm realizing now we don't have to wait for permission. We don't have to wait for a publisher's approval. I've had a lot of publishers not get my work and then in the rear view say it was a slam dunk, and now maybe they're going to start to realize they should start listening.
Well, and also you build up a reputation, like you fulfill your shit.
Yeah, thank you. I mean,
like if you fulfill your shit, you have this reputation. I deliver, because you all hear that story. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's artists and writers that have gotten screwed.
Yeah.
But there's also people that have been screwed by artists and writers, and you're like, we thought this was a slam dunk with this dude, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say one side's better than the other. I'm just saying there's both sides to it.
Yeah. I mean, and I feel really fortunate. I mean, the book is done. Our 44 pages and covers are all done. We are just waiting on one more pinup, and then we can send it to the printer. So
actually,
book is ready.
That too. There's 3 covers. Can you talk about the 3 covers
4.
briefly?
Yeah, there's Ruben Rojas, our serious artist, who has our main cover. It's terrific. You can see in the bottom right corner of our screen, Kenneth Wagnon has our D cover. It's our Akira homage, our hit and run cover. Mon House has a really creepy winged monkey cover, our Death from Above cover. And then Rio Burton has our really beautiful kind of movie poster style cover, our Apocalypse Oz cover. And so, we've, for me, I approach variant covers as, if you're not necessarily grabbing onto the main cover, what's different styles that we can do that might tip you over the net. And I think that between Mon and Rio and Kenneth, we really kind of run the gamut of different, levels of realism versus cartooniness versus energy versus emotion versus atmosphere. And I think there really is a cover for everyone in this. We do have some awesome pinup artists as well that are going to be in the book. Alex Cipriano has a really cool Tin Soldier pinup that we've got in the book. That's our print, our Kira Okamoto print, our Yellow Brick Road Warrior print.
I love that one.
Kira had such a great idea of having the Yellow Brick Road sort of light Dorothy up from below. I really enjoyed that. Joe Mulvey has a really cool print that we've only shown a tease of, but it's very cool looking. He and my Spencer-in-law colorist Jason Smith did a really great collaboration together. And we've got some other pinups in the works that we will hopefully be showing sooner rather than later. It's just it's very cool to be seeing what we have in store for our readers. As somebody who's been sitting on all 44 pages for a long time now, this preview, you ain't seen nothing yet. This is just the tip of the iceberg, and we've got some really cool stuff to show soon.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always excited to see your work, and this was something when you finally dropped, and like you made mention, you've been teasing this thing for a while, but when this finally dropped, this was so me. I mean, it touches on so many aspects that I love, and the fact that this was your first Kickstarter, I was like, you know what? Someone already has a pre-established history, someone's stuff that I already love. I mean, to me, this is a no-brainer, and this is me telling you, community, this is really a no-brainer. I mean, if you're not jumping on this before it actually goes to a major publication, which I know this is going to be, there's no reason why I can't, you're missing out. You really are. And, David, again, as always, it's such a pleasure to have you. I enjoy rapping with you. And as always, I always want you back. And, I mean, please, if you could, wrap it up for me, for the community, and tell the community, one, how they can find you outside of the description below. But exactly what is in store beyond even odds. So they want to keep following and jump on your newsletter.
Well, sure. Well, first off, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at PeposeD. It's my last name, first initial. You can follow David Pepose Comics on Facebook. You can subscribe to my newsletter, Pep Talks, at bit.ly/pepnews. That's where I tease all of my projects. You can also go to linktree/PeposeD. That will go. That has quick links to all of my stuff. Yeah, and we've got some more fun stuff coming down the works. I have another project that's going to be announced probably in the next month or two. A really cool project that is unlike anything I've written before. It's surprisingly spiritual, but it's also got kind of a little bit of a dystopian Handmaid's Tale kind of bent to it. We've also got some really fun anthology stories in the works. I've got a horror story. It's my very first horror story that I'm really proud of. The artwork looks incredible. I'm working with Erica DeRusso on that, and she is just going to blow up very, very soon, I think. I'm working with George Santiago Jr., my Spencer and Locke cohort, on a superhero one-shot of a character that I've had in my head for a very long time. I'm very excited about that. And and then some other fun stuff in the works, as well as Spencer and Locke 3 that I'm still working on. So yes, I'm keeping busy. We're also hard at work on the second and third installments of the OZ. So it's the right kind of busy. I'll sleep when I'm dead. But I can tell all of your listeners out there, if you've read any of my work, you're going to love the OZ, especially if you're a Spencer and Locke fan. You're really going to dig this book. But even if you haven't, I think this is some of the best work that I've ever been a part of. It's some of my best writing. It's for sure one of the most beautiful books I've ever worked on. I firmly believe that the OZ stands toe-to-toe with any book in the direct market. So, visually. So I think if you're looking for a cool action-adventure story with some fantasy, with some magic, with some real heart and some real themes to it, definitely join us in the trenches of the OZ.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, the thing is that when you were mentioning a spiritual book, and I know we're probably having to, I guess, conclude at this point.
Yeah.
But I've noticed, like, actually the more honest and better ones are the ones that are actually kind of gritty. Because if you try to paint it like, oh, it's all like happiness and light, it's like, no, fuck you, it's not.
I think showing people that have real problems is something that I think is very cathartic to readers. And some people may say that my work is a little dark, and I don't dispute that. But I would say that makes the redemptive arc shine that much brighter in contrast. I think there's room for a lot of different types of stories, and I do have a few stories that are a little lighter on their feet, like Going to the Chapel and a few other things that are in the works. But I think trauma is something I've always explored in my work, even in Going to the Chapel, because I think those are the themes that shape us, and they really kind of inform the overall themes and tenors of our lives. And so having characters who are able to really confront those traumas, no matter how debilitating they might be for them, I think that gives readers a little bit of hope. And at the end of the day, that's really what I hope to offer our readers.
Wow, David and Christie, thank you so much for being here. David, again, I am so looking forward to this. Stay back here behind stage. We're going to work something out. I got to jump on this. But, hey, community, you know my taste. You know what I read. And if you don't remember, David is one of my top 5 writers that I ended up picking last year of my favorite stuff that I'm reading. You guys know what I was reading last year as far as my indies, and you kind of know what my taste and flavor is. This is one of my most recommended titles, and I haven't even read it. And the reason why is because of the writer. So if you're not jumping on this Kickstarter, you're missing out. But hey, David, again, thank you. Christie, again, as always, I greatly appreciate you. And from us at 12 Comic Talk, we're out. Thank you very much, everybody.
Bye, guys. Have a great day.